Okay, let's get started. So, how did I spend my Easter break? Well, I upgraded my operating system and I upgraded Xcode, and I had to add more RAM as well. So, just to give you a bit of insight, I needed to upgrade because I wanted to get current. I was working with a previous version of Xcode. Now I'm working with the most current version, 4.3.2, with the latest iOS, which is, I believe, 5 something at this point, yes. And before I was on 3 point something with the 4 point something iOS, and I can't have that. I have to be up to the latest and greatest. So I went out there to, first I was going to upgrade to it the Xcode and the iOS, and then I realized it does no longer support it with Snow Leopard. So in order to upgrade my system, I had to upgrade the operating system to Lion. Not a problem, however, you can get it from the Apple Store. It's $29.95, $30. That's not the problem. I mean, unless money is a problem for you. But ordinarily, $30 is pretty reasonable for an entire operating system. It's not a bad idea. However, as a safeguard, I had to back up my system, which was a good opportunity for me to clean up the system, actually, and get rid of some old files, made some room. And long story short, it took about a day and a half for, the download is about 4 or 5 gigs or so. So that on a slow DSL, that was about 4 or 5 hours just to download it. The upgrade itself through all the different stages, and luckily I did not have to restore the backup, so that was good. So plan for about 12, 16 hours, I think. And then, after I upgraded to Lion, then I had to go and upgrade Xcode. So you have to go back in. And this is for everything. It was the entire system upgrade. And then I noticed that my Microsoft Office didn't work anymore. So I had to download and install openoffice.org, or I think I have NeoOffice on there now. Long story short, I'm happy, except for after everything was completed and done, the thing ran like a snail. It was running really slowly. So I highly recommend, if you're going to take this leap into the future, have funds available for RAM. So I only had 4 gigs of RAM on here. So I went and I upgraded. The upgrade cost about $50 from Fry's Electronics. Not too bad. I probably could have bought it cheaper online. I have an older model, so it's don't remember exactly what it was. 2 chips, 4 gigs per chip for 8 gigs total, which is the max that the computer will handle, for $50. So the whole cost, and now I have a system that's running faster than my other system was, and I have Lion, and I have the current Xcode with the current OS. So it's worth the investment. However, it is a weekend. It is a couple of days. It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, it is easy. It's just time consuming. Right, now after I've said all of that, today's lecture is going to be a preview of it. And as I was trying to do last week, and I had brought in the wrong file actually, I found a more updated version of this, and instead of writing it myself, this one is actually 215 slides long. I'm borrowing this one from an open source Stanford lecture series. So it's nice because it was just done like within a couple months ago, and it's on the same API version. So the window you're seeing here was the same window I had up a few minutes ago here. This is the window. And it is on a slightly different version. This is on a 4.2. I have 4.3. So mine's actually more up to date. I've gone through it, however, and I've looked at it, and there's some significant changes with this particular release, and the iOS version 5 is significantly different as well. So it's not a bad idea. I'm going to run through this at the speed of light and kind of show you what the differences are, highlight what you're familiar with already, hopefully, and what is different, and run through the building of an application. So this is twofold. It's going to be, as promised, we're going to write a calculator application, which is one of the assignments, I believe, for the course. So I'm going to go through and show you the steps in terms of creating this application, but the steps are going to be for the newer API. So those students who are still struggling with creating apps will find this useful for the app creation part. Those students who are already familiar with it will find it interesting if they haven't upgraded yet. This is what you get to look forward to. I want to say it's a significant improvement. It's worth the upgrade. If you have another, couple days, get a couple days off. Don't do it if you need your computer the next day. You're not going to have a working computer for 12, 14 hours or so. and then span that over a couple of days to make your life easier, and then be prepared to go to Fry's and buy more RAM, and be prepared to back your system up beforehand. I read too many horror stories. I didn't have to rely on that, but I didn't want to lose everything. The one really good thing, however, is that it's not like Windows, like when you upgrade, you actually, all my apps, everything are the same. I didn't have to reinstall anything, which is why it probably takes such a long time. So it just went ahead and updated the operating system, kept all my applications, kept all my data, everything intact, which was really good, actually. However, there are some problems with it. People do actually have said that they've had to reformat their hard drive after that. So on the safe side, it's always best to back up anyway. All right, so what you're looking at is the screen I just showed you a few minutes ago. It's Xcode version 4. It's a splash screen for it. Looks pretty similar to the 3 version that we're familiar with so far. If we're going to open up a new project, and I'm going to kind of go through this fast, because it's a pretty long tutorial. However, if you do have problems or questions, just stop me and I'll slow it down. So you obviously, just like the old API, you select create a new project. When you create a new project, oops, here we go. Now we have this new option. It's the simple view application. Didn't exist in the previous API, which is a little confusing actually. The project types actually changed, which is interesting. We had window. We don't have window-based application here anymore. Now we have simple view application. We have page-based OpenGL game empty. This is the default actually utility applications. This tabbed view application, I started playing with that. It's actually kind of cool. So the project types have changed slightly. And this is for the iOS, I believe, and this should be 5, but it's not listed here. But anyway, the slide set here I'll upload, make available as well, so you have this to come back at a kind of a slower pace. But it also uses the model view controller, same as concept as I've been going over in this class. The initial app creation has a few more steps in the beginning. You have to actually put in the name, so product name, company ID, and stuff like that, before you just put in the name of the project, right? So it actually automates some of the project setup for you, a little bit more than the previous API did. And you can also select the device family. It's a little bit, there's more options, essentially. There's a new feature called a storyboard that didn't exist in the previous API. Some of you have already been using the storyboard. Actually, in some of my lectures, I've been talking about the storyboard, but wasn't really a feature of the software that I had, which is another reason why I needed to upgrade. What this application example is going to show you is a calculator, an RPN calculator, and it takes operands off of a stack, uses a type for each number that you're hitting, and does a calculation, so you enter numbers in. So it's a very simple application. So there's fields in the project that you'll have to complete. Here is the calculator, is going to be the name of the product name here. Hopefully you can see that on the slide. I just looked over, it looks pretty good. And then company ID, well, this is sort of like the Android path, essentially. So you're going to enter in the package path, in terms of the identifier. And the class prefix, so enter calculator is a prefix for the classes. This is the template. It's going to use it to generate different items for you. It's going to use calculator, calculator delegate, calculator this, calculator that. So if you don't want, we don't want the names of the classes generated by the template too, so we can actually, take that off if you don't want it. But you'll get it actually a little bit more automation. So there's a little bit more project setup is what I'm trying to say. So it automates a little bit more. So iPhone, iPad, Universal. The Universal is a new option actually, I believe. I don't believe the older API had this one. It runs on both the iPhone and the iPad. So you can actually make it cross-compatible. It's the iPad itself and the iPhone each have its own UI design. Since they're different UI idioms, you can actually kind of make one that works on both. So 2 different in one. Here's the use the storyboard. It's new to the iOS 5, so it's a way to organize the model view controller. We're going to use it. In fact, this example has a really good sort of preview of the storyboard concept as well. Using the automatic reference counting, this is the plus. It makes all that stuff about garbage collection, I didn't even have to talk about that anymore. Seriously, this does it for you. So the ARC stands for automatic reference counting. So it's a fantastic upgrade, and it's just part of this version, wasn't in the previous one. Causes you to generate all of the code necessary to manage the memory, puts it in for you automatically. So it allocates, for the allocation of the objects. Definitely want to do this, and you want this to be checked, because then you don't have to put in all of the memory related method calls and code that's necessary for each one of the objects. It puts it in there for you. So I could probably, next time I teach this course, say, hey, just select this option and skip all the memory management lectures. But then you wouldn't know anything about the garbage collection, so that probably would not be a good thing to do. But in essence, it's going to automate and make your life a lot easier. So with the 3 switches in the shown position, click on the next. I don't know why that's there, actually. Just click on next and to finish off this screen here. Include unit testing. We're not going to cover, I didn't actually cover unit testing in this course, but if you wanted to, this would automatically generate test cases for each one of the classes that you put together. Very similar to JUnit, if you're familiar with that in Java, but it's not JUnit. It's a different automated, because we were working with Objective-C instead of JUnit. And we're going to pick the directory here, same as before. Select the create, and as I mentioned before, I'm not going to read you all of the stuff on the screen. Instead, you can look at the visual, and I will make sure when I upload this video I'll zip up, no, actually I'll put it on bhacker.com. I'll put the link on there. It'll be easier because this is a pretty big file. So I will probably have to pkzip it though, just to, I don't think I use that word pkzip anymore. Compress it, I'll have to zip it or tar it or something. Alright, select the directory location, press on create, and here you go. You've got this project type. Look at the interface, a bit different. It's a little bit more complicated in my opinion. I sort of like the old interface better. When I saw this and I went, whoa, oh my god. Okay, so there are fewer panes that you can actually close. There's no closable windows. Instead, you've got it all opened. So the best part is over here though, however. This is a little bit easier, in my opinion. I don't know. So we've got the calculator app delegate. So we got the same .h's, we got the same .m's, the same concept as before. But now we have the main storyboard, and we've got calculator, view controller, same as before, and supporting files, same kind of framework as before. The only thing that's different is this storyboard. So you've got this new application. You probably want to you'll probably want to make this window as big as possible so you can actually see everything in the window. If the window comes up small, you're going to miss some of the options over here, and you're going to miss some of the information. The other interesting thing you get is in here, when you run stuff, you get more status information. You see a little bit more instead of that mystery of what's going on. Is it going to load up? And you wait for the simulator to load. And here you get like a little status indicator and stuff, and we'll see as we go through the examples. So what do we have over here? I can skip through some of this stuff because we're already familiar with the .h's and the .m's in terms of the templates and the implementations. So what we're looking at is the same as before. We have got the model view controller. So we have the view controller. Here we have, and I'll just focus on the new stuff here, the view that's inside of the main storyboard.storyboard. So the storyboard is going to encapsulate the controller and all of the views. And it's a way of actually kind of putting together in sort of a similar, it's sort of, actually, I don't want to use the word prototyping, but it's very similar in concept as to creating a model, I guess, prototype. So over here we've got the run button, which is, kind of, it's in the same location as before. In fact, you can downgrade. The interesting thing is if you do a fresh install like I did, you notice you don't get anything else. You just get the 5.0. Actually, it's not 5.0, it's 5 point something or other now. But anyway, long story short, you don't get all of the previous APIs. However, you can go in and download them manually and add them in. So, which is interesting. They just want you to use 5 and nothing else. So down here, if you run it, what do you get? You get the window that pops up over here. So this is the MVC views to start out blank. Obviously, click on the run for the application. You still have all the different components as we had before. They're just arranged a little bit differently. So we still have the simulator. We still have the interface builder as well. So this is the status I was talking about. So now we have this little thing that says, oh, we're compiling, we're linking, we're debugging, or doing something, or so we have a little progress bar that kind of rotates across the screen, tells us how the application is working. And so this is up here. We can change the scheme chooser if we want, same as before. That feature is the same as before. And then pressing and holding this run button, other run options will be available. So instead of actually having to select the debug, the release, the different options, you actually have to think about it and hold on to the button and then wait for the window to pop up. And you're going to see other options show up. So we get a little status thing that says hopefully you'll see a build successful. In fact, you can try this just with a plain old project. So if you just came in, because most of you guys just came in a few minutes ago, just because you're going to be lost unless I tell you what I'm doing here. Just take 2 seconds and catch them up real quick, just to be nice. But I upgraded my system over this Easter weekend. So now I have Lion and I have the 5 point something or other, iOS 5 point, well, the major release 5. And it's running with a 4 point something or other Xcode. And it's completely different. So what I've done is doing right now, I'm probably almost at the halfway point, or getting close to the halfway point of going through a model application build, showing you the new features and comparing them with the older features for anyone who might be interested in upgrading, and also reinforcing the concept points and building a calculator application at the same time. So as much time as I'll waste on that. So that's what we're doing, just because otherwise you're going to be lost completely. Alright, so we also have a bar that's going to appear at the bottom of the screen at the console that's going to give us our debugger. Talk about that in a few minutes. But this is the different part here. The running of the simulator is actually integrated into the interface of Xcode. So instead of being a separate component, we actually see the status, and we also see the debugging stuff. We still get the separate simulator that shows up, however. We don't actually have to worry about that integrated as well. So the window will pop up, it will show up blank, and congratulations again, you've actually loaded the simulator. So that's one of the first things I would do actually, is just pick a default project. This is nice though. This is new as well. So we're done glaring at this empty screen. We can actually press and stop the simulator. So instead of there being another integrated simulator extra menu that shows up and then looking for the menu, clicking on the simulator, finding the menu, everything, even the interface builder, is all integrated into the same interface, which is nice actually, streamlined. The other thing that you guys missed is all the garbage collection template on the project setup. There's more selections, so you can actually have it do automatic template for you for all of the garbage collection, for all of the resource releasing, of all of the manual stuff. So it kind of cuts down on what you have to actually know. So, all right. So down here on the bottom of the screen, so what you're looking at here. Actually, let me just go back a couple here. You're looking at the screen in terms of both the interface builder and the code at the same time, which makes it easier for dragging and dropping as well to connect components. And then we have the simulator that comes up. This is the iPhone simulator as an example. We could stop it and start it and run it right here. You press and hold on the run. It'll show up other options for you to run in debug, run in release mode, run in a couple of other things. So in terms of the navigator, over here we have the navigator. It shows all the files, same as before, except for in the other API it was sort of in the middle. Now it's towards the left a little bit, the screen's a little bit wider. Then we have the document outline, which is going to show you the different pieces of the document actually. And it's in a hierarchical iconic view as well. And then over here we've got the interface builder. So we can move the mouse over here and we can take a toolkit telling us, we can hide the document outline if we want. In fact, it's just going to be a visual of the document outline. That's what it's going to be. So we can click on the button down here and we can actually hide it. Not too much else you can actually do to the screen to make it smaller. So as I was mentioning before, make it big, expand the screen out completely, otherwise you'll miss half of it because it's a lot busier than it used to be. So what do we got going up here? Tons of little icons, as I was mentioning before. I'm not a huge icon fan either. I'm more of a menu person. However, everything's iconic based in this version. So we've got issues. If there are any issues, you'll see it appear. Before, you used to see a pop-up window. Pop-up window would show up. You see the stuff on the bottom. You see the little red exclamation point. Again, the windowing is gone. It's all in the same interface now. So over here we've got the search, we've got the, are there messages or issues, we've got the logs to look at over here. It's going to change the view for you and it's going to show up the different components, and we also have this option over here that's going to change it. So you can need to see the model view controller now. You can actually change over from the editor perspective. And on the screen, it will actually change over to the assistant editor. It will hide and show different things, the button icons, depending upon what your editor view selection might be. And we can use the editor assistants as well in this. And this is actually same concept, different implementation on this particular version. So down here on the bottom here, we have the same concept as before in terms of the automatic. And if you haven't noticed it yet, it actually puts the comments in for you automatically. So every time you build Hello World or whatever, it puts the comments on the top with the name of the program and who wrote it, on which day, and what company, stuff like that. You can actually have more options now to turn it on and off and to do other things with it if you go into the project setup configuration, which most people are not going to play with, like they didn't play with the other one. So we have the .h file, and this is what you're looking at in the window over here, I believe. And here's where the storyboard comes into place. So if we look at the main storyboard, .storyboard, which is the new feature that was added to this particular API version, alternate clicking on the control header files for the calculator view controller.h would also have brought up the same editor assistant editor, but it would have taken a little bit, would have taken the assistant editor out of the automatic mode. So in the automatic mode, when you click on this, you get all the components that are associated with it that are going to show up in the view window on the right. So the default view is the one in the center with the project document icon hierarchy to the left of it. So what happens when you click over here, instead of it showing up down here or this main window here, it's now split into two and it shows up on the far right, and the document view went away. But you can bring the document view back by switching on the views. So knowing how to switch the views, you'll get used to as you practice it, as you work through it. So all of the controllers in the iOS inherit from UI view controller. Notice that the interface and the .@end syntax is in here as well. So UIKit.h imports all of the iOS user interface classes. So this is another import that's included in terms of the project type that we included here. And the import is also in the include, but better. So now instead of import, it's like, our import is like the include, but it's now import. So it's more Java-like actually versus C++-like if you think about it. The base language is the same. You don't have to worry about the base language. It is still Objective-C, but it's the syntax is a little bit different, or some of it's a little bit different in terms of their perspective. So let's make even more room. You can make more room by dragging the center bar, pulling it over. What ends up happening is the center window is going to shift to the left. So everything shifts to the right or it shifts to the left. So it never actually goes away. It just comes out of view. So, which is different than the old API, which had the windows on top of the windows on top of the windows that would show up. So you don't have that anymore. Because a lot of people actually, I believe, me just speaking from my own personal experience, would lose the windows, especially with the interface builder. It would go away. I'd be like, where is it? And I'd constantly be looking for windows. So I actually sort of like this a little bit better, because it's all here, still here. You just have to drag it over or click on the view organizer and kind of figure out where you're at. So. Okay, so here we can bring back the utilities area by clicking on the far right icon. So we're going to start building the user interface. So in terms of building the user interface with the model view controller view, to do that, you're going to need the text label and some buttons. And here's the user interface. So you're not bringing up the interface builder anymore. It's already there for you. So you're not loading on a different simulator. You're not actually loading the simulator. It's already there. You're not loading the interface builder. It's already built into the interface for you, so, which is a little different actually. So to get the object library, which is still there in the utilities area, you have to bring it up through the button. So you have to use the buttons to bring up instead, because you don't have the menus anymore on the top for the interface builder to bring up the library to drag and drop things over. But you still have the library, which is kind of weird. Like most of the features are still there, they're just organized differently. So utilities over here. And the utilities button is this one over here, utilities area. It doesn't look like a utilities button. That would be, in fact, when I first looked at the screen, I went, what in the world are all those icons for? And then I went, oh, well, they have a purpose. They're called view. So So that's why editor, view, organizer is kind of like the three main components of the screen, sort of. Think of it that way. Top part of the area for the utilities shows the information, identity, attributes, dimensions, all the stuff you were familiar with from the interface builder about the currently selected item, the file, the object, the left. This is it over here. It's underneath this little blue or green. This is that tab that showed that we used to have a 3-section tab on the top. Now it's 3 sections down this way. Or actually, you can format it any way you want. You can change the view on it. Bottom is the library of terms, objects, snips, stuff like that. And here you can actually see it now. It's not quite as hidden in this particular view. That's that thing that used to get lost all the time as well, because you could close it. So this is the utilities, called the utilities now. So now what we've got here is the top bar is going to be dark gray if you've selected an item, so it changes colors on you a little bit. And so we have the file inspector little button up here, shows the information about the file containing the selected item. Quick help, if you need it, so the little button to the right, and you seriously have to have good eyesight for this, because it's, it's hard for you to see it here, but this is actually about the same size as you're seeing it on your screen. It's not that much bigger. So media library down here, object library over here. My biggest complaint is I'm not liking the small little icons on the screen. And the whole way of this, the indicators are looking. The other interface, I believe, is a little bit more intuitive, but it might just be because I was used to it. So occasionally Xcode might download some documents. So you'll see the status over here. So this is the iOS 5.0 libraries downloading. So if you have an internet connection and you're connecting it will actually update itself. And so when you go into it, the library will download information, newest patches and things of that nature. And over here on the side over here, we've got the attribute inspectors, size inspectors, all of the different features that we had before, but instead of having tabs, we have icons. And instead of having tabs that would change the view of that little long little strip that opened and closed in different sections, it's here still. In fact, you can see down here, this might look familiar. We've got the library down on the bottom here showing you the items that you could drag and drop and push over. So some of the objects that are appropriate for you to drag into the view are going to show up for the object library. Interesting thing is, actually this comment is pretty interesting as well. Instead of showing you everything, it only shows you the appropriate items. So depending upon the project type you've taken, and we've chosen, I believe, a single activity application type. There's a utility application type. There's a couple of other. The view is going to change, of course, associated with the objects that are appropriate. So down here we have the little scroll bar. So you can find a scroll bar here to go through the little items as well. So, all right. So just the same as you did the last time. In fact, the interface is identical. So if you are familiar with dragging and dropping items from the library, putting it on the canvas, connecting the outlets to those items, identical. Except it's a little easier, actually. That part actually improved a little bit. So you have the item down here. You drag it, labels of instances here, UI label 1. In fact, all of the widget components are the same. And they're all the same label, which is good. So they didn't actually go through and rename everything as well, which is nice. So this particular, we're going to start building this application, and the application is going to be a calculator for those people who came in late. And the calculator is going to keep a little stack of items that were stored in, that have been entered in, and is going to perform the calculation on it when the person presses enter. Or, it's going to, well, when you'll see it come to life. It'll be a simple calculation. If you're lost for ideas in terms of the calculator that you're creating as an assignment for this class, this might actually be helpful to you. I believe the first assignment is a calculator that you're creating. And as I was mentioning before, for some of you people who came in a little bit later, I will update. This is not uploaded yet, but this week I'm updating everything on the website. So you'll have this at your disposal if you're still struggling with that first assignment, or I believe it is the first one. So we're going to drag a label here from the library. We're going to stick it on the canvas. Same thing we've done in the previous examples, except for the interface looks a little different. Notice the dashed line over here. This is different. We didn't get this. We didn't get the ruler last time. So we have a dashed line over here. Xcode displays as you to help you line things up nicely. So it's not a total what you see is what you get, which is what we had in the last release. It's lining it up. using a ruler. You can also drag and drop this, double click on it, change the label, same thing as you were able to do before. Drag the corners, stretch it. So notice they're called little handles, I guess, according to the slide set. Handles around the label so you can resize it. You can also go over here and click on the attributes in the properties box. I'm not sure if it's really called a properties box up, but that's what I usually label it as. You can click on the attribute inspector. You should be able to see the attributes over here. You can make it center align, left align. You can change the color of the text and all the different things that are associated with it. So now over here we can we can look at the width and the height associated with it. So it's a little indicator that shows you exactly when you click on stuff over here. It'll actually pop up a little window, actually kind of show you the height and width of stuff. Grab the lower right handle and you can resize the label. So you can use the dashed blue line guidelines, just pick a good size associated with the dimensions to put things in relative position to each other. And over here, just like a word processor, clicking on the right alignment button will actually take it and put it on the right hand side of the screen instead of the left hand side of the screen. So notice that changes the inspector reflected immediately in the view. So in the older API, it did happen immediately, but there was, in terms of viewing it, you actually had to run it in the simulator to really get a good impression of what it's going to actually look like. Some of the GUI elements, the widget elements, didn't actually show the same as they would in the simulator. So, and what I've got over here, this is the font, changing the different fonts to make the font bigger. Or 24, that is nice, so it made the font a little bit bigger. So you don't want the calculator to appear with a label. So you can double click on it and you can edit the state as well. So if you double click on it, same behavior as before, you can actually change the label. You can change the font, you can change everything by the accessing it through the widget item instead of the properties window, which is the same effect, so it depends on your style. So here we're going to add a 0 to it. So on the top here, we can also edit the label text in the inspector. So using the inspector, we can edit the label text. So type in 0 over here. This is the top of the calculator, by the way, if you came in a little bit late. We're building a calculator. This is the output, so it should look like this after you type in 0. It's going to be a number input. So your controller needs to be able to talk to this view. This is where we're going to drag and drop the outlets to the items themselves. So as an example, in this particular case, we're going to be able to update the display as digits are pressed, and the results of those operations are going to hopefully show up here in the results field. So we make the connection between the controller and the view directly using the mouse, same as before actually, just dragging and dropping. If we do that, what we have is inserting the outlet, so the outlet or outlet collection, same as before. So we hold down the control button, control key on the keyboard, which has actually worked in the other API. You didn't actually have to hold down the control button, though. You could have just done it with the mouse as long as you clicked on the appropriate inspector with the appropriate widget. And while moving the mouse down, you're going to drag a line from the text label directly onto the code of the controller. That is the new part. It's backwards. So in the old days, you started with the .h file. You created the IB outlet. You created all of the information. Then you opened up the interface builder, and you took from the class information and you dragged the opposite direction. Now you're going to drag from the interface builder to the .h file, and it's the same concept actually, it's just in a different order, and it's going to create the template for you it's going to write the code for you actually. It's not going to write all the code for you, but it's going to give you the template. So you'll notice that if you control drag onto your code, an indicator will appear, making it easy for you to see exactly where in the file the outlet code will be. So you're going to put it anywhere. You can actually put it anywhere in this file. This file doesn't have anything in it. It's pretty empty right now, but you can put it anywhere you want. If you don't hold down the control key, it's not going to work. So now you actually have to use the keyboard keys with this. I never used the keyboard keys. It always worked without the keyboard keys. I always used the mouse to drag and drop and connect things because we had that nice little arrow that would show up. And you just release the mouse button, and it actually did it for you. Not in this newer version, which is how it started out. The original API versions original, you had to hold down the control keys. And then they took it away. Now it's back. So put it in there. So what do you get? You get this little dialog box that shows up. Talk about your automation. This is nice, actually. Xcode now wants you to know what kind of connection we want to make between the controller and the object in the view. So in this case, it has a correctly guessed that you want an outlet. Okay, well, there's not too many other options. The outlet's just going to be a property for the controller through which we can talk to the element in the view. Same concept as before in terms of the outlet. But we have a little box now that says connection. We can create the connection type instead of having to remember what it is. And then now we can fill in the blanks. So the description of the connection, the controller, and it will create the template for us here. We're going to put in display. We're going to have the UI label we're going to put in here. It's going to be an outlet, so we're going to name it display since it's going to be the display for the calculator. You know, this is the display up here. The storage type are strong or weak. We're going to select it to weak, so the outlet is to a pointer of an object, a UI label in this particular case. Strong pointer means that the UI label will stick around until we are done using the UI label. Weak, it means it's going to go away, so it won't stick around as long as somebody else has the strong pointer to it. So that's same concept as before. Actually, hasn't changed. It's just a different way of setting it. So this essentially is automating the creation of the outlet for you by the pop-up window and by being able to select the menu items for you. What do we got here? Clicking in on the to create the property itself in your controller. I was just going to click it again. There we go. And now we have it in here. So we have the property weak. It's going to be a UI label, UI outlet called UI label and display. So just to kind of show you the effect of what's going on. We took this, we dragged it, we dropped it onto the source code. We filled in the information that was associated with the property that we were setting and all of the options that were associated with it. And it's backwards because now we have the code. So instead of writing the code first and then taking this from the code and dropping it over, we did it in the reverse order. This is a lot more intuitive, actually, I think, personally. And voila, the code has been added, the property to your model view controller. So this does not lend itself to syntax errors because this created it for you, which in my opinion is the bonus because now you don't have to worry about syntax errors. It's not writing the code and then connecting it to the outlet. It's doing it in the opposite order. Fewer errors, I would assume. And it has hooked up the property for you automatically as well. So it's going to connect it. Now you can, I'm going to skip through this stuff. You can download the slide set and take a look at it later. But we've actually gone over some of this stuff in previous lectures, and it's going through all of the different parts of the property that we just created. So this is about 215 slides, and we're on slide 41. So I'm doing pretty good going through it at speed of light. But it's twofold. It's showing the new interface, but it's also showing you how to build a calculator program. And you know, if you're still struggling with the concept of a property and all of the settings that are associated with the property and the outlet, then download the slide set and go through it because that's going to give you what you just hear in the missing links, hopefully. Anyway, long story short, we can highlight the label here. We highlight it. We get a little pop-up box that says label -0. -0. So you move the mouse over. You have the mouse over. Don't click on it, and the little icon shows up. Hi, did you need something?
Yeah. Can we have a few minutes? If I can take 5 minutes from the class time.
You can do it right now, actually, because now we've taken a break, sort of. Let me just pause this video.
Okay, just because.
Okay, and we're back. So, if you have your mouse over the little pluses that show up, which is new, this was not there before. Instead, we saw the pluses in the inspector window with the view that was associated with the outlets that were associated with the GUI items. It's backwards now, or not backwards, it's the way it should have been originally, I guess. In the source code itself, after you create it, you see the little button here, a little plus. You put your mouse over the plus, the item over here on the interface builder highlights. Turns blue in this particular case. I don't know if it's going to turn blue on your system, but it highlights so you can actually see what GUI items is associated with what property or what outlet association happens to be in the code, which is different as well. And then over here you can actually view it per storyboard as well. Storyboards, as I mentioned before, is a new feature of the 5 plus 5 5.1. It's from 5 forward in terms of all the minor releases. And it's just nothing more than a folder, you want to call it that, or encapsulation of a bunch of items that all belong together, model view controllers. So if you highlight over, you'll also see, in fact, what is it? We created one for both a single unified universal application, which was for iPhone and for iPad. So if you click on the icon, you'll see a list of the storyboards with the same property, with the same hook that's associated with it. And then over here, if you mouse over the only item in the list, we'll select the label as well. So you can select the label by hovering over it, which is the only item in the list. So we haven't really added anything to this. Now what we're looking at over here is clicking where you can switch the controller's implementation so that you can, what we just looked at a few minutes ago was the .h file, and you can see it's over here. So you have to click on this little thing up here to actually switch it over. Because it's way over here. So you can change the view if you wanted to, but that's kind of a hassle. So what we did was we created the skeleton for it, or the .h essentially. So we click over here, we can switch the view, rotate it to the associated .m file, which means we don't actually have to go through all the other files. We could just flip over to the one we're interested in, because it's only going to show us the .m for the controller. So this would be the calculator view controller .h and associated .m. And so we can click on it. Now we've switched over the view to the implementation instead of the specification. And when we've done that, now we can actually kind of look at the code. So we can welcome to the implementation, the .m file. So we can notice that the @implementation here does not specify the superclass, only the interface in the .h file. That's the only one that's going to do that. Instead, now it's missing in terms of the implementation. So the synthesize is important. Matter of fact, we covered that last week or the week before. We talked about synthesize in terms of that particular component. But now we have this for display, which was the outlet that we added in the .h file. So now we have synthesize display, which is associated with the implementation for this guy right here, the property. Okay, so in here we have the Xcode has added some extra code that we don't need for this application. So we can select it after, select everything after here and delete it if we want, but it's automatically going to put the stuff in for the life cycle. So in fact, we looked at this as soon as last week actually. We looked at the life cycle in terms of the view did load, view will load, all of those different states that happen in terms of the loading and the unloading of the app. If we don't want it in, we pull it out, but it put it in for us automatically actually, which in the old API you had to put it in manually. It didn't actually add it to your code automatically for you. In here it actually put it in automatically. It will also put in all of the garbage collection, the deallocation stuff for you as well. But see now here all the way to the end, so this particular comment is telling you that we don't need this for this application, so we're going to select everything from after the synthesize display to the very end, leaving the end on there. We can go ahead and delete that, take it out of there if we want. We could leave it in if we want. It's just not going to be implemented in our simple calculator program because we don't really care what's going to happen on the load and the preload and the will load, the checking. So, and then noting that the synthesize of the code automatically added to our controller's implementation when it created the display property. So this was added automatically. It wasn't in there before. So now we can change it around. So which is what this note is going to basically tell you about. And there's nothing really other significant on here. We can set the value of the pointer. We can do all sorts of different things with it. So from a code perspective. So now we're going to actually add the buttons, I believe, next. So okay, now it's time to add the calculator keypad buttons. So we can take the buttons over here, the rounded rectangular buttons, and lo and behold, I hope this thing doesn't go through creating all of the buttons for the calculator. But you're going to drag a bunch of them over here. You're going to drag the rectangular button. Same thing as we did for the label. Put it on the canvas. And over here we can see that we can also do the same thing before. Grab the corners, make it bigger, double click on it, add the label. Or we can go over to the side over here and put the information in manually if we wanted to. So it's your choice actually, so what you prefer in terms of the interface. And remembering the term outlet refers to a property. through which we're going to send a message from the controller to the display, to the view. So which is where that word outlet is coming from. And so the next step, we're going to specify the action that's associated with the UI button. So remember, the outlet was for the label, which is the information, the messages exchanging. Now we're going to have the action controller. So the UI button is going to use the UI button is going to have an action instead of a property associated with it. So we're going to do the same thing as before. We take and we click on the button and we come on over here to the source code, and notice that we're in the .m file this time, actually. So it doesn't really matter which one you're in. We're over at the .m, and we're going to click on to insert the action. So because it's a button, it knows it's an action. And the label, and it was a property by default. We could change those actually. However, it's going to give you the appropriate one associated with the appropriate widget, which is nice because prior to this version you had to guess. You had to implement it yourself manually, so you didn't really know which one. So hold down and control while you're moving the mouse over, same concept as before. Xcode correctly guesses that you want to create an action with this particular control drag rather than an outlet. So talk about your automation. It's going to do most of the writing for you, so which is nice actually. So hopefully maybe by the end of this lecture you'll be, I need to upgrade. Because believe it or not, actually I've been playing around with it for, well, I installed it this weekend, so I've only been playing around with it for a day or so. But I tell you, it's a lot easier. A lot easier. Fewer syntax errors. Because if you follow through this routine, you don't actually really have to type very much. You have to fill in the action for the button. You need to write a little mathematical calculation there to add all the items together. But you don't have to really think about, adding the action. And you don't have to worry about, because the problem that I was having in the past is I'd put the code in and there'd be a syntax error. You bring up the interface builder and the outlet's gone. It's not in the list, or the button's missing. And there's nothing to drag over because there's a problem with it. It didn't get compiled correctly because you had no idea what was going on until you did the connection. And that was an issue for me. I don't know why, because I'm a bad typist. But the problem's gone, which is probably my selling point right there, which is why I like it. But it's worth the upgrade. Just as I was mentioning before, just make sure you go to Fry's, buy $50 worth of memory, so you have at least 8 gigs on your computer. Be prepared to spend at least 16 to 20 hours for the upgrade, and $29 for the Lion version that you'll have to get to upgrade your Xcode. But after having gone through all that, and back your system up before you do it, dedicate your entire weekend to it, and then after doing it, you'll be happy. Either that or go out and buy a new computer if you can afford it. I guess that's the other option. And you'll have Lion, and you'll have enough memory, hopefully, and you'll have everything set. All right. So after you've taken it over, you've released it. This is a little bit redundant, so I'm going to kind of skip through a little bit. Again, you have another properties box. You take the property box, you fill it out. This one's going to be for an action instead of a property, so it's going to give you slightly different options that you'll have to select from. And in terms of here, this is the object to which the action message will be sent instead of the property information. So it actually lists the object. It says calculator view controller over here. So this is the name of the action method up here. This is the ID that's associated with it. So this is the kind of touch event that will be caused, or that will happen. There's a touch inside. So instead of having the other menu that would pop up, it would say, do you want to touch inside, touch on, touch release, all these other little, you just have a multiple select scroll bar, a scroll option here, which is not too bad. And then on the bottom here is the same option as before. It specifies the format of the message. So that actually, I believe, is a new option that wasn't in the previous API. So here we're just going to, instead of going through the options, I'm just going to kind of slip through this a little bit more. When you press on the connect button, we are actually finishing. You're establishing the connection, and after you fill in the information. And then when you do that, you get, lo and behold, the same thing as before, but instead of the plus symbol, you get this like little round thing over here now. You can see that where my mouse is kind of going. That's that little connector. It works the same way. You hover your mouse over it, makes this one turn blue, highlights it. You click on it, it's going to give you all of the methods that are associated with it for the storyboard. So this is the first Objective-C method declaration that we're going to create. It's an IB action, and it's a digit pressed. We have ID sender. Read through it at a slower pace on your own. It's the same information I've been going over for the last couple of weeks, actually. Okay, now it's time for time this button is going to be touched, the digit pressed, it's going to send to our controller with the UI button itself a message, and the message is going to be the sender argument. And the sender is going to be what button was pressed, obviously. And was it number 1, number 2, number 3? And similar to an outlet, you can use put your mouse over it. It actually turns into, highlights it, says it's a button. This is kind of stupid, actually, I think. It's kind of obvious, but perhaps maybe after you've done a few of them, maybe you get lost which one belongs to which one. So it kind of tells you which one is associated. So. And the same concept as before with the storyboard information as well, and you click on it and it'll tell you the storyboard. It's the items in there. There's only one item in here, so we're not going to have too much to look at. So now this part of the slide is going to go through the ID, and it's going to go through all of the code syntax, which I'm going to skip through because we're already familiar with some of that stuff. So select the type of sender argument for this particular method. So UI button, so replace it with the type UI button because that's the argument that we're going to use. And we need more buttons. Actually, we have to do this for the entire keypad. And I'm not going to run through each one of the keys individually, but I believe the slide set's going to skip and have it all done in a few minutes. So you can copy and paste your first button to make another button out of it, which is the interesting part. So you could have done this actually with the older version as well. Works with the older API. So you just highlight it, right mouse click on it, select copy, click somewhere else, select paste, and voila, you've duplicated it. And in here, it's actually going to duplicate the code for you. So the copied button will send the same action digit press as the original one. So now we have 2 buttons. Now you can move the copied button and line it up. And the grid's nice too, because if you're building a calculator, the older version doesn't have the built-in grid. And the grid actually is not something you turn on and off. It shows up automatically. And it only appears when you're trying to align. So if you don't click on anything, the grid goes away, which is nice. And here we have the 3 button, copy to paste it again, and we got the 4 buttons out here and again. Oh, there we go. I skipped ahead. We got more buttons on here now. And notice we didn't actually have to duplicate, which is nice. We didn't actually have to duplicate all of the little, because this is problematic, because if you did this in the other, well, you didn't get this code to go on, but if you cut and paste and duplicated it, depending upon if you changed everything correctly, it can get kind of confusing. So it's nice that it doesn't actually duplicate it, because then you can drag it over and create them, each one of them manually. Because all the buttons may not necessarily be responding in the same way and doing the same thing. So it looks like this, sort of. I don't know what this button is on the bottom here. So now you can double click on the button to make it the text editable, and this is the easier way of doing it. Same interface as before. Click on the button, you can change the text that appears. So it's going to be a 7, 8, 9. Is that the regular calculator? I think the 1, 2, 3 goes on the top. I don't know. When you design your calculator, you can put the numbers in any order that you want. Apparently, I haven't seen a calculator in ages. Is that the way calculators are supposed to go? That's backwards, isn't it? Upside down? Yeah. I thought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so I'm not losing it. That's good. It is for all the buttons. Keypad should look like this. That's upside down. I don't care how you do your calculator, actually. That should look familiar. This is from the old interface. So when you start building more complicated user interfaces, it was going to be important to be able to see the outlet and the actions associated with it. So you can right mouse click on the object, and this little screen is going to show up. So if you right mouse click on the button, right mouse click is not going to work in this particular case. Actually the same concept that worked the same way in the old interface. Right mouse clicking brought up the I don't know what to call it outside of a properties button, but it really does show you. But it's going to show you down here at the bottom, same syntax. It's actually the same screen. It just shows up differently, a different location. Or you can select the common inspector over here, which the arrow, which is going to give it to you over here instead of over here. And same concept as before, except for there being huge tabs. Now there's small little icons. And now we can put our mouse over here, and we're going to see the connection, actually. So then we move the mouse over, and you'll see that the whole view will highlight where you're showing the button, sends the message to the controller. So the whole view here is highlighted because this is the calculator view that was depressed. So in terms of this was on the touch up inside controller. So you can right mouse click on the display itself up here, and you can see this information here. This is appropriate properties associated with that, so you guys connected to the display outlet for the controller as well. And you can kind of see the connection here. If you move your mouse over, you can actually kind of see it. So all you're basically going to do is use the mouse instead of the inspector window. So in fact, it's a little more intuitive. You right mouse click over it, so it pulls up the little windows. And the same thing on the bottom. Notice the 4 buttons above are highlighted, and you can see down here digits pressed. You can see all of them that are associated with it. And then what we're doing here is changing the view down here, right mouse clicking, representing the controller versus the object. So we have the object view. In fact, those were those that other little box that showed up that had the icons in it. It's down on the bottom of the window now. So if you wanted to switch classes to a different class, you'd click on the one that looked like a box or an object, and then the other one that was for the controller. Okay, so then you can move the mouse over the outlet. You can actually highlight it. So it's basically demonstrating the fact that the concept is pretty much the same as the other one. When you moved your mouse over, it showed you the line. So now it just shows you, highlights the item instead of showing you a line. So up here on the top, then it's grayed out icon if a file is not saved. Oh yeah, the status of the files, which is up here, very small actually. It's still, you can turn on the properties. In fact, by default, there's an autosave when you go to run it, which is the same as before. However, up here you have more status indication on whether or not the file has been saved. So we have the grayed versus the ungraded. So if you've changed it, it becomes grayed, which means it's not saved yet. If you save it, it becomes regular. It's not, it's like a selected versus an unselected look, actually. So. And in here we have the little warning symbol that shows up now. In the other interface there was no warnings. This warning here says that it's not defined. Button number 2, well, none of the buttons are defined. Only one of the buttons was defined because we cut and pasted to create the other buttons. So in here we have a little warning letting us know that, hey, we didn't define the outlet. We didn't define the action for the rest of those buttons. So, and again, kind of small actually. Maybe I need glasses. So now this little thing here is now highlighted, or now it's regular. It's not depressed. It's not grayed out anymore. So it means we saved it. So click anywhere in the file itself, and it will actually save it automatically. So there's an autosave feature. We didn't actually have the autosave feature in the previous API. If you close the window without running it, it didn't save anything. So now there's an autosave if you click into it. I'm not going to go through the rest of this. Okay, so here we go. We have the interface here. So it's time to write the code inside of the digit pressed method. So we're going to get to execute. So when we touch the buttons, it's going to take and create a stack for all of the button presses we've done. And then, well, we need some pluses and some minuses and stuff like that. So some calculations, operators. So now we go down here, we start writing the code. I'm going to kind of skip through this because you can, this is your first assignment. I don't really want to do it for you. So here's the code, actually. And seriously, if you are stuck still and you can't create the calculator, actually, who's created calculator? Hasn't? Oh, you. I know you in the back. You've done probably. Have you done them all? Yeah. Only the calculator. And of course, I'd pick the calculator as well. This is the example I found. So this code would actually work if you wanted to steal it. The interface obviously is going to be different if you're working with a different API. If you're working with a 4-point simulator or 3-point something or other. But the code is actually the same, so nothing's changed with the language. Objective-C is Objective-C. However, this is totally different. But you probably could borrow and steal this technique actually, and create a really nice calculator with it. In fact, you're probably going to create this calculator. So. And I will put a link to this file with the video so you can actually get it. Alright, so here we have more status indicators that we didn't have before that actually appeared over here. And this is in the margin area along with this. So we know this is the controller, the connection actually. So now we have this exclamation point with the yellow says, uh-oh, we have a problem. The little triangle is a warning that there's a problem in the line of the code. So a lot better actually, because in the previous version we didn't have any indication. We had to run it and then we'd have these red marks all over the place that told us that there was a problem. So now we can actually see the problem. This reminds me of Eclipse, actually. This is like a very Eclipse-like kind of troubleshooting technique. Eclipse puts all that stuff in the left-hand column, and you highlight over it, and it tells you information. Same concept. Highlight over it, and it'll tell you what the problem is. So kind of a hybrid now. We're looking at Eclipse/Xcode in some ways. So the message sending syntax ends with a this and matching this to start with it. So it's the same as before. So what's the problem here? Well, we don't know yet. We won't compile. There's an error in it. So unused variable digit is the error, actually. So the warning, it's actually not an error, it's a warning because it's yellow. So the warning is going to appear to be correct. It is correct. So we don't yet use, because we haven't built the code yet, so we don't have any. We declared this variable digit, but we as an NS object and a string object, but we haven't actually used it yet, which is why we have that. And that's what I'm talking. That's Eclipse. That's Eclipse-like. This is not Eclipse-like though. In fact, this would be a nice feature for Eclipse to have this total number of warnings, total number of errors. This is very Xcode-ish, and this would appear at the bottom of the window, and when you were finding errors when you selected to compile it. So instead of putting it at the bottom of the window because there's no window anymore, put it in the status indicator. So this is warning triangle appears here as well to tell you that there's one warning, 2 warnings, or three warnings. There's also the warning over here, another place where warning triangle appears. So it's in 1, 2, 3, 4 places. They're trying to definitely get the word out to you that there's a problem. There's a warning. Oh, that's for a warning. So I think that's a little excessive, actually. But I may not have seen this little icon up here, and probably would not have seen that one. I definitely would have seen this one, though. So maybe it depends on where you're going to look. Okay, so now we're on the storyboard. So a very simple debugging technique is to log the information to the console as well. Now we had a console. We actually had to double-click on the console box, and it would open up a console. This does it for you automatically. So there's a printf-like function that you can actually put in here, and that's going to be part of the syntax that we're going to put in here to put a little warning to the console if we have a problem. So this is just basically a demonstration of how to write a little status message for debugging to the console. And then we can run it. So we're going to press on this little arrow over here. Let's run it. So we have nothing more than that. We don't really have very much functionality going on yet, but we have the keys up here and we have the status over here. Notice that the console starts out hidden. The console's on the bottom of the screen, actually. And then we can expand, so we drag it just like Eclipse, actually. This is in fact the same space in Eclipse where the console actually appears. So you take the bottom, hold on to it, drag it up. Except for in Eclipse, you got tabs that show you log window, console window, a bunch of different output areas. And naturally what we're going to have over here are buttons instead of tabs. So we have buttons, so we press on the bottom, it's going to show you different things. So, or buttons up here, that's going to show you different things. So this button up here will show the debug area at the bottom of the screen. Debug or console area are very similar. And now we have it down here. This is the console. These are the variable views. That's very Eclipse looking, because you can write log variables in Eclipse for Android, and you can do the same thing here. This is for you can filter the logs, so you can actually see which error messages showed up, or which points, which breakpoints were hit, when information was set. It's kind of like notes to self that you can actually log into the source code. Same concept, actually. So I'm not going to say they stole it, but it's very similar. But it's nice, though, if the interfaces were to become exactly the same. That would be perfect, because you'd only have to learn one interface, really, if you're doing both. So, alright, so if you click on it, you'll see type show copying, see the condition. This is just console information down here on the bottom. What we're done here is click the view to the console window instead of the debug window. This is the debug window down here. Oh, no, this is the console window down here. It's still the console window again. So we can click down over here on the right-hand side. We can clear it. We can change the view to debug or console. So both of those pictures actually had the console on it. So the console also logs the timestamp information. Same thing as you'd probably notice in other types of logging. So you should see the output of the console from your NS log as well. So NSLog will actually kind of write stuff as well. So if you touched 4, you'll see user touched 4, which is nice, which is automatic actually. You don't, and well, okay, so it's very similar to some of the automation that's added in with Eclipse, but this is more feature rich. So Eclipse should steal this actually. So, you know, the Android folks should steal this part because this is useful. Because you know what actions the user did from the NSLog, so which is going to, you know, kind of tell you the user touch number 4. User touch this is from the NSLogs that you're creating. So you can accomplish the same task in Eclipse, however, it's the same. So user touch 6, user touch 4. You can stop the emulator again by pressing the stop button up here instead of having to actually close it. So you can view the old console output from the navigator by changing the views as well. You can remove the NSLogs and continue implementing. And you can select the line of code, hit delete, do everything you want with it in terms of deleting it automatically. So the warning here is correctly back because we had it implemented and then we took it away, so there's no implementation here. It's not used. So, all right. So in terms of making the local variable called myDisplay, it's a pointer to the UI label. So you can actually take your display output here, connect it. So if we look at it, Xcode knows that it's self. So it thinks already ahead of time in terms of where it belongs. So you won't really notice any local variables. You won't have to actually think about it. It will know that it belongs to self. And think about all of the life cycle stuff now in terms of all of the associations. It does a lot of the automation for you. So it remembers the controller header file, what it looked like. You can actually bring that up and take a look at it and compare it to the implementation file as well by clicking on changing the view. And the property itself is nothing more than a setter method. So remember the setters and the getters. I talked about that a couple weeks ago actually. So instead of it will actually create it for you automatically. It won't fill in the body of the method, but we'll actually put it together. So here we're calling the getter method from the normal method notation. The setter method will be called by the system at the runtime to wire the output up. So. Alright, so the rest of this is actually just going through the code syntax that we've actually kind of covered in multiple different types of lectures. So it turns out that the property is important, and Objective-C syntax as well. You know, the at property, the setters and the getters is called the dot notation. Don't really have to go through all that stuff again because we're sort of, hopefully at this point, being at the very end of the course, we should be familiar with the object-oriented concepts. So I am going to fast forward. There's a quick help feature. This is the same as before, actually. Not a huge fan of the help systems for some strange reason, but you might be. So the same help features as the previous version of Xcode is still available. It's all online, so you have to have an internet connection for it to work, actually. So useful key. So quick searching on an item itself is going to pull up the help that's associated with the item where the cursor is located, which is different. So it's context sensitive. I think that's what it's called, context sensitive. Or it's kind of like Microsoft Word, where you click on highlight a word and you go to the thesaurus or something, dictionary, it looks it up for you. Well, this is going to give you the help on it automatically. So there's a little bit more integration with the help. I don't believe I've never tried that feature, to be quite honest with you. So I don't know if that actually worked in the previous version or not. So. My guess is that it didn't actually. So here it is. It's going to give you all of the information that's associated with text as a property here. So the word text here opened up full documentation on that particular method. Alright, so a few other little things about it. The organizer, which is the far right hand side of the screen, this little button up here. If you click on the organizer, what we see is this interface here. In this interface here, this is the organizer window. Each method arguments, return values, what it does is explained. So think of this sort of like Java docs. But instead of creating it automatically, it's called organizer. And it's done in a slightly different format for a slightly different purpose. Instead of documentation, it's actually giving you a summary view, I should say. Use it that way. So you can change the view over here, search on items. You can also bookmark certain pieces of the code that you're interested in coming back to. So here's our property text up here. Anyway, gives you information about it. You can read through a discussion, see the more complicated method that's associated with it. Scroll down using the button here. Basically scrolling down and reading through the information that comes up in the organizer. So the top of the UI labels class reference page as well, if you scroll back up to the top, because the view that you were looking at prior was in the middle of the page. So you can see the superclass and what it's linked to in terms of sample code. So the documentation is definitely improved. And there, as a resource, if you're a documentation person, you like to read about, if you like to use the help system, this feature is for you. And it's found in the organizer. So, scrolling down, giving you a little bit more information. Scrolling down a little bit more, even more information. In fact, this is, I don't believe this is coming from an online, it probably is online, don't quote me on that. I don't know if it's download or if it is online. I know that the help system used to be online, so I kind of skip through this because I'm not a help person. Browsing the documentation as well, you can use the search features and also the find features to find certain things. So if we go back to Xcode, get out of the organizer, go back into the main interface window. Now we can know exactly what this text property is all about, and everything about the dot notation that's associated with it. So I'm not going to go through the dot notation. Familiar with that already? Selecting item to paste. Okay, so we will see in terms of the rest of the implementation here, the shortcuts of hovering over highlighted sections of the code will bring up the pop-up menu that will show you the associated methods or the associated implementations. For the UI label, in this particular example, sets the UI display text. This is similar to the Eclipse feature when you hover the mouse over and it shows you, or you start typing and it actually starts pulling up a dialog box that shows you different ways of finishing the sentence, which is kind of interesting. So it's similar, it runs in a similar fashion, but it's more of a highlighting versus a typing. So you're going to use the dot notation briefly. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about the dot notation. So let's see, skip ahead because we're about halfway through it at this point. There's no way in the world I could possibly cover this entire lecture in one sitting. But the code itself is Objective-C, and the code itself will work in any version of the API, any version of Xcode. So let's see. Okay, so added the functionality for the buttons. Now pressing on run again, and we've got the emulator back up. We're seeing it now. But we're going to fix a bug that actually appeared here. Doesn't look quite right. Way over to the left, so we can make some minor changes to it. We can add a 0 to it. I'm not going to go through the code syntax for that. But we're modifying the code here. Actually, this is interesting. We've hovered over the warnings. This is very Eclipse-like as well, showing you the multiple warnings that are appearing for one particular item instead of a single warning. And so now we have 2 up here instead of 1, but it's associated with 2 warnings that are associated with the same line of code. So it does show you multiples. Eclipse actually only shows you one warning per line, which is interesting. And then after you fix that warning, it shows you another warning for the same line. Here it actually is smart. It's showing you both warnings for the same line simultaneously. So it's actually thinking ahead. Now up here it says no more issues, no more warnings. So in this particular example, they fixed the issues of the warnings. So let's see. So they're running it again, and now they're going to see the no trailing 0. So we fixed the problem with the trailing 0. So now there's a working calculator, so we can bring back the utilities area here. So what we had before was the code writing, and we had the simulator running. So now if we click on the utilities view, we're going to bring back utilities after pressing stop. And then now we see this screen shows back up again. So the interface builder will appear. And then now making a slight modification, dragging another option. I believe we're missing all of the pluses, the minuses, and all of the operators that are supposed to be associated with the calculator. And believe it or not, the code is the same. I mean, similar fashion, we're dragging items over. Just to reiterate the point, we're taking an item from the library, we're dragging it onto the interface builder canvas, we're following the alignment. Here we saw the alignments. We're lining the button up. We're going to click on the button, we're going to drag it over to the .m file or the .h file. It works with either one, actually. Here in this case we have the .m open. We're going to drag it over to the .m. We're going to get the dialog box open up. We're going to fill it out with the information for the action for that particular button. And we're going to see it show up as a method down here for an IB action. Then we're going to double click on the items. I'm kind of moving ahead here. Double click on the item, change the label so it shows a plus sign or a minus sign or something. Here we go. Set all the buttons here. Actually, the slide clicked ahead as well. And then dragging some stuff down here for the bottom, for the equals, or no, the enter. I call it enter. Taking this, dragging it to the code to create the outlet, the IB action that's associated with it, changing the action to the event of the touch up inside, and filling in, here's an entered pressed action, so no sender argument was included with that. And now we can open up a new tab. Actually, you know what this code is going to do is the same thing as we have done prior, is adding a new class file. I believe this is probably going to add a new combination, a .m and a .h that's going to do the functionality. So we have all of the button activities accounted for. We put in the operators there, so we have all of that stuff accounted for. Now the slide says actually, and you don't have to do this actually for your calculator program. You can run it from one controller, one class file. But this example is going to go through, and this part's the same. You select File, New, and you create Objective-C class. This probably is a little different. I believe before we had a drop-down menu. Didn't have it, or it may have looked like this. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember at this point. But we're selecting a new class. It's going to add it to the list for us. We're going to put in the class. We're going to put in the subclass. This is a little bit more. Before it made the assumption, just created it for you in like 1 or 2 clicks. Here, same as creating the project, it's going to have you add a little bit more information. You know, where you're inheriting it from, what directory you're going to save it in, where you're going to call it, what project you're going to add it to, kind of stuff. Saving it, and now we can go back to the navigator here and bring up this list over here, which is going to be the storyboard. So the main storyboard is really giving us, this is the brains of the operation, calculator brain.h and calculator brain.m, which is going to be all of the arithmetic that's associated with the buttons that we're going to essentially take out of the controller and put into a separate class as the brains of the operation. And now if we kind of look at the view part here, you can kind of see that this is essentially going to be the storyboard information. We added it to the storyboard. So the concept of the storyboard is really nothing, you know, that groundbreaking, really nothing that new. It's just a new terminology that's being used in terms of the package information. So we do see the multiple views here with this calculator.m, and we still have the calculator brain.h over here, the counterpart. So we got the m and .h on the split screen. So now we can use the tab settings here to go from the storyboard to the calculator.m and go back to the storyboard. We can also notice automatically remaining tabs. So the tabs appear for us automatically, as you'd naturally expect. So we can switch back and forth between which one we're editing. And the same concept as before, adding an API to the header file gives us a warning here for the implementation because we haven't implemented it yet. And incomplete implementation, yeah, of course, we haven't implemented it yet. So it is a warning, it's not an error message. So there are a few more warnings than there were in the previous version. So all right, we're getting close to the end of here. Trying to decide. This is all going to be pretty much implementing the plus, the minus, the functionality. You may borrow this code if you want for your calculator if you haven't figured it out yet. This is going to use, looks like a mutable array. It's going to add the items. So if we're going to do a plus, it's going to take all the items we're going to add together, put into, or all the items that we're pressing, put it into a mutable array. We know about those. Those are the ones that can change in size automatically. We're also going to use a stack, operand stack, which is going to be a built-in data structure that's going to keep track of all the items. We're going to push it on a stack and then pop each one of the items off the stack to manipulate it. Now we have an error message here. And the error message now, you can see, kind of shows up in red instead, and we can see red up here instead of yellow. So same kind of notation, same actually kind of icon look, I believe, as the previous API version as well. So. Alright, so we can click on here, we can see the error, and here we're sending a double to a parameter that's incompatible with the type ID. We have a type mismatch error. Okay, it's kind of a classic error. So we can fix the error. And this is really going fast. We can fix the error, and lo and behold, the red little error message went away. So there's danger here. Accidentally left out the self. Didn't put it in? No. So you can delete this, see what, no error will appear. More errors. So, alright, I believe the rest of this is just going to go through some errors and creating errors and removing the errors, fixing the errors and scrolling down. So, let me just see if there's anything I have missed. That is pretty much a good overview of the entire changes and the way that the new Xcode and the 5.0 and iOS is actually, API is actually working. So this is our mode. Switch back to controller mode, yeah. So I believe the slice is switching back the view after it got finished with the computer brain by using the tabs and the file list. And this is one long demonstration. It is adding in information for the operations. Okay. All done. Oh, thank God. So more buttons looking good. Okay, so the functionality for the operators have been implemented as well. And so we have now hit and run it, and it appears to work. We touch on 5, touch on 2, touch on 1, and press enter, touch 6. Hopefully 521 is displayed by 6, well, divided by 6. Oh, we press divide by 6. Okay, so the order in which we're entering it in is a little bit non-standard. Well, it's not non-standard. It's a different format than the regular old basic calculator, but it still is a proper calculator format. Anyway, so the rest of the slides is actually showing you the functionality in terms of, in fact, that's the last slide, showing you that it actually works. So you could borrow and steal the code. You could probably write it yourself. Probably not as difficult as you'd actually expect. So that is, believe it or not, slide number 215. I skipped through most of it. That was not relevant to what I wanted to discuss. So when I upload a video, I will put in a URL to the source of this because I don't want to copy something that is not rightfully mine. However, it was a lot easier to copy this than it was to create my own, especially after I just installed it this weekend. So, given the time, this was actually a good solution to the problem, but it is part of the Stanford University iPhone series, open source, free available iPhone series of lectures. So, questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, so that was what you have to do for your first assignment. A long time ago, I went through all of the other assignments for the course. They're all done the same way. Once you do one, the rest of them should hopefully fall into the same pattern. You do not have to use version 4 point whatever, 3 or whatever it is. Actually, let me see, what is this version? I believe it's 4.3 or 4.2. The slide is on 4.2. This is 4.3. The slide set's actually back a version, but it is all still the same 5.0. Actually, let me just check real quick here. Oops. I believe I'm working with the same API. Single view. Hello. I have confused it. File executed doesn't exist. Okay. I just want to see that. Up 5.1 is what I've got running on mine. So the slide set is actually back a release. It's 5. I thought there was a 5.1 out already. So it's working with a little higher. Although the interface, I've checked it out, is practically identical. The default screen display is slightly different, but between the different Xcode versions. But it's close enough. All of the major controls for the organizer, for the views themselves, are pretty much in the same spots. So This does definitely look a little bit more complicated than the 4.3 with the 3 point whatever. Actually, the lower you get, the less feature rich, the less automation, and the easier the interface looks, in my opinion. So, all right. So next week we have what I call my final exam review. What I'm going to do between now and the end of the week, probably going to do most of it tomorrow, is update everything. So put all the lectures in the LMS or EMS, whatever you call it. Make sure the B-Hacker's up to date, go through it all, and by the end of the week probably write the final. And then so next week on the 16th, we will have what's called the final exam review, and the final will be on the 23rd. If you don't like the 23rd, you can take it on the 25th. So, and if we don't have any questions, we're all done for today. Okay, thank you. Good turnout today.